With Gen 10 right around the corner, the hype is starting to build for what should be an absolutely momentous occasion. The first double-digit generation releasing during Pokemon's 30th anniversary and releasing on the brand new, much more powerful Nintendo Switch 2, Gen 10 is already shaping up to be a pretty big deal. And there's also been a lot of rumblings, rumors, and even some apparent leaks that have given us an idea of what we might be able to expect from this generation. With that in mind, while I have personally been thinking about all of this information, a thought occurred to me that Gen 10 might actually be even bigger than we expect in terms of what it plans to do. And while what I'm about to share with you is just speculation, and even a bit conspiracy theory adjacent, you could say, I think it's a really fascinating idea that I thought would be cool to do a video on. So as we get started, this discussion is going to be based around some Gen 10 leaks. It's nothing ridiculously crazy, but it does seem to be legit at this point, so if you want to stay clear of any of that stuff, here is your official warning before we get into it. With that said though, many of you might have heard by now that Gen 10 is reportedly going to be based on Greece. This has been in the rumor mill for a while now, and I have even mentioned it in a previous video myself, and at this point it just seems like that could very well be the case. With that said, while a Greek region has a ton of different implications in terms of what that could bring to the table, I personally have been very struck by how full circle a Greek region feels in relation to all of the other generations and regions, because there is actually a ton of Greek reference within the various Pokemon games already. For example, Sutopolis City in the Hoenn region is based on the Greek city of Santorini. The remakes of the Hoenn games are named after Greek letters, and as a result, Groudon and Kyogre are also connected to this Greek influence too. And even Rayquaza is as well, with it in particular revolving around the letter Delta. Spear Pillar is also inspired and modeled after Greek architecture, which the Creation Trio obviously have connections to. Arceus, as the head of the Creation Trio, is also known as the Alpha Pokemon, which is one of the letters of the Greek alphabet, with the Unknown also having a direct connection to Arceus too. So there is already a pretty decent handful of Greek-inspired stuff in Pokemon, and it's also very big, important stuff in terms of Pokemon lore. Speaking of which, all of this stuff with Greek connections that I've just mentioned is not only important lore-wise, it is also connected one way or another to the origins of the Pokemon world itself. Arceus as the alpha Pokemon obviously needs no explanation here, and the same goes for the Creation Trio and their overall tie to the Spear Pillar. Unknown can also be lumped in with Arceus and the Creation Trio too, and Groudon and Kyogre are said to have created the land and sea respectively. In this context, this also makes the fact that Sutopolis is Greek-inspired all the more interesting, because even it has a connection to the origin of the Pokemon world through the Cave of Origin, which obviously Groudon and Kyogre are closely connected to. So, to kind of summarize here, going into a potential Greek region in Generation 10, we already have a decent amount of Greek representation in Pokemon already. This representation is also extremely significant in terms of lore, and it all connects one way or another with the origins of the Pokemon world. With all of this in mind, it makes me personally wonder whether all of this stuff could potentially have any bearing on Gen 10 if it is in fact based on Greece, especially considering how big of a deal it is to Pokemon's lore. if it did end up connecting to Gen 10, then Gen 10 could potentially dive into some pretty heavy stuff regarding the origins of the Pokemon world, and potentially how this new Greek region plays into that. And I think this idea is even more fascinating and even more plausible because of the timing of it all. As I mentioned earlier, this potential Greek region isn't just happening, reportedly anyway, it's happening for Generation 10, and for the 30th anniversary of Pokemon. Both of these milestones are absolutely huge deals that Pokemon is assuredly going to make a very big deal about, possibly in a similar way to what we saw with the 20th anniversary and the release of Generation 7. And speaking of Generation 7, Pokemon Sun and Moon were definitely impacted by releasing during Pokemon's 20th anniversary, as there were a lot of very significant additions to those games that were due to this fact, such as the Alolan forms, the player character moving to the Alola region from Kanto, the plethora of returning characters, including even Red and Blue, and heck, even Ash freaking Ketchum himself was integrated into these games, with him being the one that gives you the Ash Greninja in the Sun and Moon demo, and his picture being included inside the Thrifty Megamart. These games were honestly as much of a celebration of Pokemon and its anniversary as they were their own thing. So Gen 10 doing more or less the same thing is definitely a very possible scenario, which would, in theory, give all of this previous Greek stuff all the more reason to be intertwined with Gen 10's plot in a very full circle kind of way, given that both the 30th anniversary and the 10th generation are gonna be very big culmination type moments for the series. So this just seems like it could be a great way to tie everything together. Additionally, like I alluded to earlier, this would make for a pretty heavy plot for the Gen 10 games if something resembling this idea were to actually happen. It would probably have a lot to do with the origins of the Pokemon world and would shed more light on details of its creation or of its past that we don't know to this point. This, in turn, would also be extremely fitting in a Greek region, since Greece is steeped in mythology and ancient history, and this is what it's known for the world over. In fact, I would go so far as to say that it would be a bit unusual if a Greece region were to tell a story that just had nothing to do with this kind of stuff. So assuming that we do actually get a Greece region in Gen 10, it seems like it is perfectly set up to not only give us a lore-heavy plot, but also a lore-heavy plot that ties in many of the other generations and regions, as a way to celebrate the series for the 30th anniversary and to culminate everything that has happened to this point in the very first double-digit generation. Maybe we'll even get some explanations as to why the Spear Pillar is the way it is, or why Pseutopolis is randomly so Greek. Maybe it all originates somehow from this upcoming Greek region. And honestly, if the story of Gen 10 remotely resembles this kind of idea in any way, shape, or form, I am going to be extremely excited, and I think it's going to make for a very special game. It is worth noting though, with that in mind, that this is all just speculation and thoughts based on the very limited, not confirmed information that we have. So take it for what it's worth, but with that said, what are your thoughts on this idea? Be sure to let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe as well. I'll be back with another video very soon too, so be sure to come back and tune in for that. And until then, as always, thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.